Hi everyone, I'm Liz Raskoff, Public Engagement Specialist at Go Triangle, and I'd like to welcome you to Zooming into Transit, a series of virtual presentations to help you stay connected with transit in the region. Today I'm joined by Andy Willard and Simone Bullock, my two colleagues, as well as our special guest, Brett Martin, Wake Transit Program Manager at the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. First, we want to take a minute to acknowledge the reason we're doing these videos, to keep people connected virtually during the coronavirus situation. We understand the coronavirus is affecting all communities, and we're working to keep you informed about transit projects in the region. Go Triangle is also still providing bus service to Durham, Orange, and Wake counties, and we're taking many steps to minimize the risks to both our passengers and our operators. So first, we're not collecting fares at this time so that we minimize interaction between operators and passengers on the bus. And we are asking folks to board the bus at the rear door, as well as exit from the rear door. We're also cleaning our buses multiple times a day, and we're providing hand sanitizer to passengers. But if you're at home and you're missing the bus like we are, we'd love to have you join us here and learn some more about transit in the region. So let's dive right in and we'll learn about the Wake Transit work plan.
Cool. So before we even talk about this year's work plan, Brett, maybe we can take a step back for folks who maybe aren't experts in Wake Transit and talk about the transit plan itself and how the work plan sort of feeds up to those goals in there.
Right, Andy. So the Wake Transit Plan itself is a 10-year plan that was adopted back in 2016, and for which voters in Wake County voted to tax themselves at 0.5% to expand public transportation throughout the county. The original Wake Transit Plan that was adopted back in 2016 included 4 big moves, which include connecting regionally, connecting all Wake County communities, enhancing access to transit throughout the county, and creating a reliable, frequent mobility network in the urban core of the county. The Wake Transit Work Plan that you hear of, which you probably hear of a new one every year, is basically the annual budget, annual phasing of all of the projects for the vision, for implementing the vision laid out in the original Wake Transit Plan.
Great. So as we all recall, we did some work plan outreach in January, and some of the projects we went out to the public about are going to move forward in July, while others are going to be recommended for future implementation. So could you highlight some of the projects that are going to move forward starting July 1, and also just give us a little more context on how COVID has impacted the timeline and prioritization of these projects?
Right. So the rationale for, if we look at the projects that were included in the January draft FY21 work plan versus what the TPAC has recommended to move forward right out of the gate starting July 1, which is the first day of the fiscal year, that's applicable to the new projects that were being considered, is that, the majority of the funding that we get to implement these projects is that sales tax, that half-cent sales tax that I mentioned. And given the COVID-19 pandemic's, the response to the COVID-19 pandemic with stay-at-home orders and social distancing, there has been a dramatic impact to our sales tax collections. However, along with that impact comes uncertainty. We only know what the impact is 3 months following the month of collections. And so the period most immediately impacted by the pandemic, which would be March, April, May, we don't have sales tax receipts from those months yet to understand, okay, what really is the impact? And so out of an abundance of caution, the TPAC has decided to tap the brakes on moving forward with a lot of expenditures in an act of austerity, and has focused on only moving forward projects that meet certain strict criteria, including projects that are time sensitive. This is just for new projects, but for new projects, projects that are time sensitive, projects that involve time sensitive external grant funding sources as part of the overall funding mechanism, and community funding area projects that are ready. And of course, this builds upon multiple years of previous investment we have made in Wake Transit. And so all of the projects that we have initiated in prior fiscal years, all of those services, they will continue to move forward as well. Just to give some, a little bit of a rundown of projects that are budgeted to move forward right out of the gate starting July 1. One project is the Carolee Route 21 improvements that Go Raleigh runs. That's something that we got a lot of public feedback on, that the service is overloaded. So the idea here is that we would go ahead and invest in frequency improvements to take some pressure off of that overloading right out of the gate starting July 1. And then, of course, you'll see some community funding area projects in there for the town of Morrisville and the town of Apex.
Great. So that sounds like new projects recommended to start beginning July 1. And then you mentioned some investments that have been made previously. So can you just remind us, if folks out there are having kids use the Youth Go Pass, or you're a senior and you're riding for free, what happens with those kinds of programs under the current situation?
Right, so all of that continues. Every commitment we made in a program that has already been initiated, any commitment we made in a service that has already been implemented, in FYs 18, 19, and 20, they will continue to move forward. That includes a lot of frequent bus service in Southeast and Northwest Raleigh. It includes a lot of improvements to bus stops, new rural Go Wake access, general public and elderly and disabled demand response trips. One of the things that we're continuing to do that you'll see included in the FY21 budget, but that continues to build on prior year investment, is completion of the New Bern BRT corridor. And continuing, of course, the Youth Go Pass program and free fares for seniors.
Great.
So these are the ones that are affected by the abundance of caution that we keep talking about. These are the ones that we have to hold off until we can know a little bit more, right?
Right, yeah. So there are a number of projects that were included in the original draft back in January that we have had to put on hold because of that uncertainty with revenue collections. And in fact, it's the majority of the projects that you saw included in the draft back in January. But these include, some of the major projects here are the Go Raleigh Glenwood Avenue route package expansion. That's part of the frequent network, which is the bus service that would be provided at frequencies of 15 minutes or less. The conversion of existing Go Triangle Route 305 to an all-day service between Apex and Raleigh. That's another major bus service expansion that we've put on hold that we will be revisiting later in the fall. And there's a number of capital projects that you'll see. A number of bus stop improvements, passenger-facing stations such as transit centers, park and ride facilities, that sort of thing, that are in some, a phase of design, planning, or even construction that we've had to put on hold to revisit later in the fiscal year.
So you walked us through some of the projects, but I think what a lot of people want to know is what is next. So could you talk a little bit more about the next steps?
Absolutely. So for the actual draft FY21 work plan, that will be released for public comment between May 15th and June 14th. And following up from that, the Go Triangle Board of Trustees and Campo Executive Board will consider the work plan for adoption at their respective June meetings. Campo will hold a public hearing on the work plan at its May 20th meeting. And so then the actual work plan, once the boards approve it, it will become active, and all of the projects you see in the budgeted section of the work plan can move forward beginning July 1st. For the remaining projects, the TPAC has made a decision to wait until probably the October-November timeframe when we can get those sales tax receipts for the months of March, April, May, June, the time period most immediately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, to get an understanding of what revenue we're actually working with so that we can make expenditure decisions with all of these projects we have kind of sitting on hold. So that's something that the TPAC, you can expect the TPAC to do in the October, November timeframe later this calendar year. And then from there, there should be some additional activity coming from the TPAC on from that list of projects and future year projects. Projects that are currently programmed for FY22, 23, 24, what our next steps are for those.
Great. Well, you definitely gave us a good look at the recommended work plan. So thanks so much for being with us and walking through that. Just to remind folks, if you want to review the plan and submit your comments, you can visit goforwardnc.org/WakeTransit. You can also mail comments to the address on the screen. And then, of course, follow us on Twitter @WakeTransit to stay updated. So thanks, Brett, for joining us. And we'll see you all again soon on Zooming into Transit.
No.